Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 123.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on true custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. Get your pencils and paper ready. You are going to love this interview today on putting speed control with David Orr, world-class putting expert and creator of the Flat Stick Academy. This interview is a perfect blend of what I would say talking tech with sharing terrific coaching case study stories. I've listened to it 2 times already, and those of you who are looking to improve your speed control, I bet are going to love what David is sharing with you today. So again, get your paper and pencils out and on to this wonderful interview with David Orr talking about putting speed control.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 123 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. Welcome back, David Orr. You know, David, it's been 8 months. I didn't realize it's been that long since we talked here, but David is a world-renowned putting coach, and I choose that word. You know, I said instructor last time. I like the word coach a bit better, David, but because I think it has different connotations. Creator of Flat Stick Academy, the website, and also the Instruction Flat Stick Academy Center at Pine Needles in Southern Pines, North Carolina. So, David, welcome back for this really great topic today.
Good morning, Tony. Always great to be with you and to discuss topics with you.
Yeah. Well, before we dive in on our speed control episode today, talk a little bit about now it's been, 2 months since we did the first putting conference. Any things you want to share about how you felt it went? Obviously, a lot of work. I know you got a lot of good feedback, but go ahead a little bit.
Yeah, I thought it was an excellent conference, 2-day conference there at Pine Needles, and Pine Needles is always a special place, as you know. And we had 45 attendees. Of those, 31 were new ones. And it's always great to see new faces. And, we had some great presenters. Obviously, we had John Dunnigan presented the 3 essential skills of putting. We had Dr. Sasha McKenzie talking about how putters actually work and how they actually move based on forces and torques. And then I thought one of the stars of the show was Paul Dooland, mental performance coach from the PGA Tour, and then obviously we had contributions from Leanne Elbaugh with Junior Golf, and Preston Combs as well did a presentation. So I thought it was a really good conference. And then obviously I presented it twice, and the only downfall was the snow day.
That was crazy, wasn't it? Yeah,
we had 12 people stuck in Raleigh for a few days. So. But no, it was a great conference. I'm looking forward to doing it again next December. I had great feedback on how it was conducted and the organization of it, and it was just a great 2 days of education, wasn't it?
Yeah, Tim Briand was great too. With True Spec. Well,
they were our sponsor.
Yeah.
So True Spec was our sponsor, and we gave them a spot. And then Tim Briand did a great job with Ryan Cole. Talking about their fitting system, and it was really good. Yeah, and
your impromptu lesson was really good. Anytime you get to watch you, it's got to be nerve-wracking, not for as much for you as for somebody doing a lesson in front of 45 people.
Well, what's interesting is I did 2 live lessons in front of 35 German professionals in Berlin.
Yeah.
And then I did 4 live lessons in France at the Normandy, the French PGA, on a stage, 30 by 8 foot stage with all the technology was built by Boris Panzart of WellPutt. So, I guess I was 6 of 6 for my live lessons, and then that one with Sarah made it 7 for 7. So it's unusual for any golf instructor to hit a home run 7 out of 7 or at 7 out of 7 at bats. But you don't always hit a home run with your students. But I just happened to be on for that month, so it was pretty good.
Well, and she was receptive too, which was great. So.
Well, I think that's the secret too, is building a relationship with the student. When you're giving a lesson, you're trying to get to understand them. You're not just giving them information. You're trying to understand their narrative and their story and what's going on with their beliefs and their concepts and see where they're at mentally. So, we've talked about that extensively.
Yeah.
That's why we have the template there, the 7 principles of putting. But yeah, it was good. It was really good. Got a lot of good feedback.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about speed control today, and you brought this up at the PGA show, saying you'd love to do another interview about it. Tell me why at this time, mention a minute or two, why at this time this is something sort of near and dear to you to talk a little bit more about with my audience.
Yeah, well, I think, golfers struggle with stimp and slope, okay? So say they're used to playing at the municipal golf course, and the greens roll about an 8, and they're relatively flat, or slightly tilted, right? Just mild breaks. And then they get invited over to the country club, and the greens are rolling at probably 12 and a half, lots of slope, steep, severe slopes, and they're underplaying break. They knock the putts past the hole, Normally it's a foot by, and then it becomes like 4 or 5 foot by, and then they've got those testy little comeback putts, and they end up 3-putting a lot. So I think one of the reasons why golfers struggle, especially with 3-putts, is they're not used to putting on different green speeds and different slopes. So I thought that would be a good topic to talk about. What are the factors that are involved in the stroke that help us adjust our speed and get some speed control?
Yeah. Neat topic. Well, on Flat Stick, you talk, I think, maybe for 20 minutes on speed killers, and obviously we can't devote that amount of time to that today, but, maybe give the listeners a little bit of a feel for what you see are some of the more important speed killers in putting that keep people from doing their best.
So we can do just a really brief summary of those speed killers, okay?
Yeah.
So when I'm giving a lesson, and a golfer's struggling with their speed, most specifically, say the golfer's coming up short, correct?
Yeah.
So mentally, are they afraid of going long? Is it just a fear of going long that causes it to come up short? And then I look into the stroke. Is the stroke long enough? Typically I see your average golfer, the backstroke's too short, and then as a result of it being too short, and if it's too slow, they're going to have to over accelerate the putter, almost like I call it icing the puck, trying to push the ball to the hole, and then what happens there is peak velocity is not at impact, it's actually after impact, and the golfer doesn't get any momentum transfer from the putter to the ball, so they end up coming short. And then there's other things from an energy standpoint. Are they launching the putt too low into the ground or into the slope? Or are they adding loft? Are they hitting it solid, right?
Yeah.
Are they hitting too much toward the toe or the heel, losing energy, or too high or too low on the face, losing energy? Or also looking at the basically the spin loft, the difference between the delivered loft at impact and the attack angle. And then is the putter just too low? Could be too low at impact. So I kind of look at all these things, but I divide them into 2 categories like we had on that PowerPoint slide. There's speed generators, right? Generating speed.
Yeah.
And then there's energy transfer issues. So those are the two categories. So basically, if I'm looking at a putting stroke, I'm going through those checklists real quick in my mind. Is this stroke too short? Is it too slow? Is the acceleration? How's the acceleration, deceleration? Are they hitting it solid? Are they launching it poorly? And that's kind of how I do it. So I had a great lesson last week on this exact subject. You looked at the putting stroke, and the stroke looked fantastic. It was long enough. The acceleration was great. Timing looked super. Peak velocity was in impact, and the person kept coming up short. And what was interesting is then I switched over to the energy transfer list, and I said, aha, the putter's too low at impact, and they're just adding just a little bit of loft by under twisting with the trail, wrist, and forearm.
Oh man, that's subtle, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the things that 3D has trained me to do, is to be able to pick up on these really small subtleties of what's going on with the wrist and the forearm. So yeah, stroke looked good. The player was a good player, frustrated, never got the ball to the hole. And as soon as I got rid of that little under twist and we got the loft delivered properly and the putter the right height, I mean, these balls were going 3-4 foot by, and they're like, oh my gosh, that is so solid. And so yeah, sometimes your stroke can look good on the surface, but underneath there's some issues that need some work on. So that was a perfect example of going through that checklist of, okay, stroke's long enough, timing's good, acceleration's good, all those kinematics are good, right?
Yeah. And
I had to look from another angle, from an energy standpoint, going, aha, putter's too low and we're adding loft. No wonder the ball's losing some speed.
So there's got to be something that's going on, right? It's not like just some magic thing. Now, you said loft delivered properly. Go a little bit into a minute on that, if you would, okay?
Yeah, so just like the club face being square at impact is important, right, in the horizontal plane?
Yeah.
Well, loft is being delivered properly is important in the vertical plane. So now it really depends on the green's speed and the green texture that you're playing on, but we typically use a general rule of 2. So we want a 2 degree launch at impact, okay?
Yeah.
Now this launch is determined by the loft of the putter that you would measure on a line loft machine, plus or minus the shaft lean, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and then also you have to understand the attack angle. Is it up, level, or down, and how high the putter is at impact? So just make it really simple. I think every golfer out there should know the loft of their putter. And then they can film with their cell phone whether the shaft is leaning forward, neutral, or backwards at impact. So let's just say you have a 3 degree lofted putter, okay?
Yeah.
So ideally, to get a 2 degree launch, we'd probably want a 1 degree shaft lean forward, right? But we also have to consider in the attack angle. But just for simplicity's sake, just get out and see if your shaft's leaning forward, neutral, or backwards. And then what's the loft of that putter? So typically, good players tend to be neutral or slightly de-lofted a degree at impact. That's what good players look like. Rarely do you see a good player with a shaft leaning backwards, but if they do, they adjust the loft of their putter. Now, what's very important is that the average amateur that I see, or beginner golfer especially, because they're pushing the club through with their trail hand, they tend to add loft. That makes sense? So if I have the shaft backwards a degree at impact, and I purchase this putter with 3 degrees of loft, now I've got a dynamic loft of 4 degrees, and that's launching too high. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we get all these ball roll experts and fittings trying to launch the ball as low as possible and trying to get it rolling as early as possible. And I can understand if we were on a perfect surface, like a felted carpet, or a pool table, or like whatever, you'd want to get that thing rolling. Some experts are saying 1 degree. So I don't see very many putters being built with 1 degree aloft.
Yeah, typically 2 or 3 these days, right?
Yeah. So what's funny is I got to tell you a story. You like stories?
Well, most stories are what?
Most stories lies. This one happens to be true.
Yeah, right.
So I was out on tour fitting for David Adele back in 2000. 9, I think it was. And I go into the locker room, and Jerry Walters was the Yes rep out on tour. And he goes to me, he goes, so what do you think would be a good loft on a putter? And I said, well, what's the shaft at impact? He goes, just say the shaft's neutral. What would be a good loft? And I said, well, probably, I don't know, probably between 2 or 3. And he goes, well, is 2.5 pretty good? Because our putters are 2.5. I said, well, isn't 2.5 between 2 and 3? And what's interesting is the average attack angle on a Sandpot Lab back in the old database was 2.8 degrees up. So if you've got 2.8 degrees up and a 2.5 degree lofted putter, you're going to launch it with a neutral to slight forward tilt of the golf ball when it launches. So it really, you have to watch out the relationship of the spin loft is the key here. That's what you're dealing with putting, is what is the attack angle and what is the delivered loft. And then also the height matters too. That's one thing that people forget, I think, is they get locked onto the loft and the attack angle, but they don't understand the attack angle controls the height, and the height on the impact, height on the face of the impact. So very important to take and consider those 3 things there.
I'm glad we talked about this little piece today. I think it was really good. I'm not sure I would have thought we were going to get into that, but that's good.
Well, it's a little bit techie, but people want to know why they come up short, and it's not just because you need to hit it harder. Sometimes you're hitting it plenty hard enough. It's just you're leaking oil.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. So sometimes, and that was the case with that player in the lesson the previous week, that stroke looked good. It looked good. It just wasn't working good.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna talk a little bit about. By the way, I once measured a 7 degree loft putter that was supposed to be 3. I mean, measuring the loft of the putter first is absolute got to do.
Well, that's why I think it's mandatory if you're going to teach putting.
Yeah.
You have to have a line loft machine. I've got one down at Pine Needles, and I got one up here at Campbell University that. I've bet more putters on that one at the university than I could dream of, because we did all my research up here in that lab up here. So the one up here is a Mitchell analog, which I actually like better than the digital, because the digital just seems off by about 1/4 degree every time I set it up to it, and I have to calibrate it all the time. So, but I've got a digital one down at Pine Needles, and that's one of the things. I mean, yesterday I had a player come in and good, a decent guy, decent putter, and he had a putter that was 65 degrees of lie, which is, that's what, 5 degrees flat?
Typically, yeah.
Yeah. And then, he had to stand a mile from the golf ball just to solve the putter properly. So what was interesting is I got him into a really good setup mechanically, and we needed to bend the lie just to 68. So typically, if a person has a relatively conventional setup, obviously the distance from the ball is going to be a factor, but your lie angle should pretty much range between 68 and maybe no more than 74.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's funny because the TrueSpec guys always ask me, they go, why are your players always got like 69, 70, or 71 degree lie angle? And I said, that's because I actually teach the grip. I actually fit a grip to their hands. And I actually get their wrists in the proper ulnar deviation. So now the only factor is distance from the ball. So further from the ball is going to be 69. Conventional is going to be 70, and a little closer to it is probably going to be 71.
Yeah.
So I think lie angle, if there's a huge discrepancy in lie angle, Tony, I think it's because there's a lot of mechanical issues that are in the stroke pattern.
Yeah.
Now, there's always Isao Aoki and there's always Steve Stricker. And look at Stricker. He's redesigned the lie angle, hasn't he, by having the heel up.
That's right.
Yeah. So he's redesigned a putter that should have a lot of rotation into a putter that just has some rotation. So you lift the heel of that putter up, you're going to decrease the rotation of the putter, which affects speed.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it affects speed. And it's interesting. Dr. Christian Marquardt from Germany, inventor of Sandpot Lab, said to me, he goes, I never thought of rotation affecting speed. Like the way you're talking about it. And I'm like, well, geez, isn't rotation speed? I always think in terms more of angular motion, right, which is rotary motion. So I just thought that was an interesting question. He didn't think of relative rotation as influencing the speed. Well, of course it does.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have full swings too, so that's what we do.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to go on to, a topic that a lot of people always talk about, the short backstroke and accelerate through the ball and how terrible that advice is. But, I also wondered when I posed this question to you, some of it is advice, but I wonder if some of it is just because people can't figure out how to get the ball to the hole. Most of the times I've thought in the past it's about, well, they read some golf magazine thing that said do that. But it's probably a combination, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, is it a cliche? Is that the proper term?
Yeah. Well, straight back, straight through, but
yeah, they're like little. Yeah. Is it a cliche? Is that what the proper word that we're talking about when somebody just says something that's been that they've heard? Well, I think what it is I think taking it back short would be great on a putt inside of 3 feet. Don't you agree?
Sure.
But if you got a 60-footer, I don't think taking it back short is a great idea. Does that make sense?
Well, it's also hard to generate any kind of speed unless your stroke is absolutely designed that way.
Well, we have to take a longer stroke so that we have time to accelerate. It's all interrelated. It's not separate. I take a longer stroke so that I have more time to accelerate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And people forget the other half. I also have to have an interval of time to decelerate. I have to have this acceleration-deceleration curve. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think taking it back short applies to a short putt. Taking it back long applies to a long putt. Conversely, with a follow through, I don't think a short putt requires much of a follow through. And a long putt would probably have a longer follow through because of the time and space that it travels and how long it takes for it to speed up and how long it takes for it to slow down. We talk about Ferraris and school buses all the time during my golf lessons when we're talking about acceleration and deceleration. Now, as far as accelerating through the ball, there's two schools of thought on this. You typically, it depends on the length of the putt and whether you're putting uphill or downhill. So typically we'll see golfers, really good putters, have peak velocity to impact. And poor putters will see sometimes peak velocity either after impact or if they're decelerating, it's too early. So it's a matter of when. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So the acceleration is a change of velocity, right?
Yep.
Over time, changes of velocity over time, but it also has a directional component to it. And that's what people they just don't understand, is there is a difference between a directional acceleration and an absolute acceleration, okay? So a lot of the SAM Putt Lab measures absolute acceleration, whereas most other technologies measure directional acceleration. So just keep it real simple. As I make a downswing, I start accelerating toward the ball, yes?
Yes.
Now, what's interesting is you're going to reach a point just before impact that the vector flips the other direction, is actually, even though I'm still picking up some velocity, but not at the same rate, the directional is actually going the opposite direction. So I'd have to show you visually on a graph what that looks like, but we're actually, in the backswing, we actually change the direction of acceleration prior to the transition. The putter might still be going backwards, but the direction of acceleration is going forwards. That's called a transition.
Yeah.
And as we get toward impact, we accelerate toward impact. And just as we get near impact, the directional acceleration goes the opposite way. So what's interesting is when we say accelerate through the ball, that's one of the biggest lies in the history of putting instruction.
Well, and the vector would go, if you were doing it through the ball, you're actually keeping yourself, I never thought about this because, hey, freshman physics, right? If you're an engineer, I mean, acceleration is a vector, right?
Yes.
But if you're going through the ball, then you're retarding your ability to allow the putter to accelerate in the natural way that it wants to, which is not straight through.
Exactly.
I mean, I never put that together until you just did what you just did and talked about it.
Well, Shazam, because
yeah,
they're
right.
different.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. The lies of putting instruction, accelerate through the ball but be a pendulum, those are two opposites.
Yeah.
They're opposites, Tony.
Yeah, right.
You can't be a pendulum and accelerate through the ball. That doesn't make sense from a physics standpoint at all. And you're an engineer, I'm not.
Yeah.
I just hang with a lot of smart people.
Well, you hang around with Robert Neal, so he's
and Sasha
you knew this stuff before, some of it, but you didn't put it in the right context. So,
well, what's interesting is the graphs. Dr. Neal taught me how to read a graph. And when you start looking, and he made a comment one time at not at Open Forum, at Proponent Group in Orlando, and said most good putters are decelerating at impact. And the whole room looked at him like he was a heretic. And he was referring to directional acceleration.
Ah, okay.
So everybody in the room who uses a Sam Putt Lab, which displays absolute acceleration, thought he was a heretic. Yet both GBD and Capto use directional acceleration.
Yeah. So
then you get into Grober's work of resonance and putting, and so there's a lot of conflicting information out there on acceleration and timing. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting point. Probably as far as our listeners, probably only the really heady people will get it. Kind of like what you just said. The light bulb went off, right?
Yeah. Well, like the other light bulb at the conference. I mean, one of the things I wrote of it, even though I see it all the time, is peak velocity after impact. I mean, it just made sense that if it is, how are you really effectively transferring energy? That's pretty impossible.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting, though, is Dr. Christian Marquardt will argue that peak velocity is after impact. Well, if you were to remove the ball, he would be right, probably. But what's interesting is when you hit the ball, you've seen a Sam Putt Lab graph, right?
Sure.
No, there's a little cusp in the graph, right? In the graph, there's a collision. Well, doesn't a collision cause deceleration?
Yeah.
Sure it does. Sure it does. So I think it depends also. I think some of the data is influenced. So the Sam Putt Lab data from 2006, 2005, whatever, early on, the numbers have shifted a little bit with the new tour data. And the numbers aren't the same. And I think that's because the numbers are a little bit polluted now, because prior to 2005 or 6, we didn't have technology. And now players are using technology all the time. And I think that changes the numbers. It just kind of shifts the data a little bit.
Sure. And he talked a little bit when we talked about benchmarks too,
Exactly. So I also think it depends on whether you're hitting uphill or downhill. I think we're going to be applying more force and acceleration uphill.
Yeah.
I think downhill we're going to be applying the right amount of force and acceleration, but we're also using gravity to help the ball feed its way down to the hole. So I think a proper study on acceleration should be done on a level surface, different distances, uphill, where we have to apply force because we're fighting gravity and friction, and then downhill, where we're not fighting gravity and friction, or we're using gravity, so to speak. Sarah Stone made a nice comment about that when she teaches lessons, that she tells her players on the downstroke, on the downhill putts, we're using gravity, and on the uphill putts, we're fighting gravity and friction. We have to apply force uphill. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I just think a proper study needs to be done in an environment that way instead of just flat putts.
Well, just go back to the bottom line. short and accelerate through. No. So we'll go on from that one, David. But
so let's make it real simple. You ready? Let's make it really simple for our listeners. Take it back as far as you need to. Yeah. Accelerate towards impact. And just as a general rule of thumb, your follow through is somewhat symmetrical to your backswing. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, that's general rule. Now, in some cases, I need to teach a player to have a 1/3 back and a 2/3 through instead of it same back, same through, because they tend toward deceleration or they tend to close the club face too quickly. So sometimes I have to adjust a player's acceleration to improve face rotation. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think as a general rule of thumb, so our listeners out there, take it back long enough for the stroke that you have good timing, accelerate toward impact, right? That'll get peak velocity at the ball. And then the follow through should be a representation of how you accelerated and decelerated, and that's it. So I don't think the follow through is that big a deal. I think it should be matching or compatible to how you accelerated, so to speak. So let's talk about that. You ready?
Yeah.
Brandt Snedeker, right? Brandt Snedeker applies a lot of force over a short backswing and a short follow through. Yes,
absolutely.
A pop stroke, right? So a lot of force over a short period of time. Ben Crenshaw is the opposite. Ben Crenshaw applies a little bit of force over a longer period of time. So a longer, smoother backswing. And what's interesting is I don't think he has a long follow through, but he comes to a nice smooth stop. That makes sense. So it's just like a smooth little tap to it. Now, if you look at Loren Roberts, though, he has a long, slow backswing, almost contrived, and then has a long follow through as well. So those would be two opposites. Brandt Snedeker and Loren Roberts would be two polar opposites on how a player uses the length of their stroke, their timing, and their acceleration. Is that a good image for people to see?
Yeah. And most people are typically somewhere in between those.
Well, yeah. And then you get these companies that make products trying to get everybody to be average.
Yeah, well, we talked about that before, didn't we? Yeah.
So it's kind of like chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. Everybody wants everybody to be vanilla. But anyway, no, it's just and one of the worst drills that just really make me cringe, Tony.
Yeah.
Is when an instructor or a friend teaches people to, okay, let's go get about 2 or 3 foot from the hole, make no backstroke and push the ball in the hole. And I'm sitting there going, you just poisoned this person. Absolutely poisoned this person. You know the drill, right? Where they just no backswing, push the ball in the hole. You have taught them 3 deadly sins in their putting stroke. And I see it in junior camps. I see it in putting schools. I see it in golf schools. Where people come for a full swing school and they get a little bit of chipping, a little bit of putting. Like we do it at Pine Needles. It just drives me to want to drink. Just sitting there going, please don't teach them that.
Yeah.
Don't teach them to push the ball in the hole. Please stop. So then I have to unteach it. I have to change that belief, change that concept. They've got motor programs already built into the brain doing that. And it's just a quagmire, Tony.
Yeah.
I just spent some time with Golf Magazine.
Neat. And that's good.
And we were talking about putting instruction. And they wanted my opinion on it. And I said, well, there's a lot of great instructors out there now, putting instructors. Phil Kenyon, Dr. Paul Hurrian, obviously like Jeff Pierce, John Graham. I mean, there's a whole bunch, right?
Yeah.
We'll throw me in there too, okay?
We better.
And
yeah.
What's interesting is putting instruction is so horrendous. It has been so bad for so long, but yet full swing instructions improve so much. Has it not?
Yeah, absolutely.
You go to a range, you go down the range of a college event or even these junior events, golly, Pete, these kids know how to swing and they know how to hit it. You know what I mean? But yet, you go to the putting green. I just had 3 out of the top 5 junior girls in North Carolina at my place within 4 days. And they show up with absolutely the worst mechanics I've ever seen. Wonderfully talented girls. It's amazing that they can putt as well as they do just because they put a lot of time into it. But just horrendous mechanics, poor concepts. And then all of a sudden you give them good concepts, really sound fundamentals, good mechanics, and all of a sudden it's like they go to another level instantly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I told the people at Golf Magazine, I said, it's time for a revolution. It's time for a change in putting instruction. It's time for people to get the facts, about what's really going on. Because, I mean, I walk out on the putting green at Pine Needles and it's just like, oh my gosh, no wonder people struggle with something that appears so simple. They're being fed poisonous food.
Yeah.
Really, seriously.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's talk a little bit about the putter itself, if you will, and some of the things that help or hinder ability to control speed, and some of the things that you see that tend to be problematical things in the putter, weighting, et cetera, besides Loft.
Yeah, so loft is the first one, right? And
yeah.
Then for loft, we've got where's the center of mass of that putter? Is it close to the face or really deep, like close to the face, like on a blade, or really further back, like a mallet? Toe hang has a subtle influence on speed because it's a rotational component, right?
And how it matches how the person strokes the ball anyhow, right?
Exactly. Face material, what the club's made out of, what's on the face, whether it's insert or grooves. The big thing right now is on ball roll, and I think with a good stroke, fast greens, having some grooves on there is good, like what TaylorMade makes, or even roll. I think Paul Hurrian is the expert to ask on that, to be honest with you. But
yeah,
you give that same putter to a person that has the putter too low at impact and is hitting level or down and adding loft, it's the worst thing possible for them. So I think the smoothness of the face, whether it's grooves or a smooth face, now you're affecting the smash factor of the efficiency of that speed coming off the face. So that's a factor. Then you got weight. I tend to, the trend is toward heavier, which I think is good for long, slow strokes. But I'll fit people into a lighter putter. I tend to use a lighter putter. I've spent a lot of time with Brad Fax, and he uses a very light putter. His putter's from the early 90s.
Under 500 grams, or can you even say?
Yeah, it's like 495.
Okay.
And it's under 500. Tiger's putter's under 500 grams.
That's interesting.
A lot of good putters from the 80s and 90s, they still like a lighter putter. But yeah, I think putters sometimes get too heavy. Why do you need a sledgehammer when all you're trying to do is hang a picture with a pin nail? I mean, it's sometimes the strokes, the putters are too heavy, and it causes jerk, like a dump truck at a traffic light. It's too heavy to get moving. So yeah, your putter can be too light, too heavy. I think people need to know how much their putter head weighs, the shaft weighs, the grip weighs. Changing your grip can change the way of that putter.
Oh, huge. I mean, I had a guy recently that had two putters, and he one of them had this 90-gram grip that, he couldn't. And I said, the first thing is put the other grip on it and let's see. A standard 50-gram grip. I mean, it's a huge difference.
Well, what's interesting is, I've got a lot of good friends in the industry, Bernard Garson makes a wonderful grip. We talked a little bit about the weight of his grips, and he's coming out with different weight options to his grips, which I thought was brilliant. What's interesting is, being here at Pine Needles and Southern Pines, Golf Pride headquarters is here, and they come over for lunch. And one time I sat down with their CEO, and I sat down with their development team, and I've done some research with them before, and I said, hey guys, I mean, you guys make the best rubber grip on the planet. You know that, right? But I said, these putter grip weights are getting out of hand. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, everybody's making putter grips so heavy that you can no longer feel the club head. You know, and I said, I got invited to Ping. And I went out to Ping and went into the archive room, which is where all the first original heads are in, you know, first runs are kept. And what's funny is I was out there at Ping in the archive room, and I picked up the original Ping answer in my hand. And I swing it, and I said, oh, this is how it's supposed to feel. And they all laughed. And I said, it feels so heavy. And they all laughed. They said, that head is only 310 grams.
Wow.
That Ball-Namek shaft, I can't remember what they said. It was, you know, just over 100 grams. But what's funny is it had a leather-wrapped grip on it that weighed maybe 35 grams.
Ah, okay.
When you take that grip off, when you go to change the grip, and you take the putter and you swing it with no grip, and it feels really good, it's because you're feeling the inertia of that club. You're feeling the inertial properties of that golf club. And the distribution of that mass has been changed. And so I think putter grip weight can make or break how a putter feels.
Well, you know, and I know you don't talk a lot about it much, but I know once in a while you do stuff with counterweighting, right? Or at least once in a while.
I mean, I
which is sort of a weight change for the grip too.
Yeah, well, it is.
Yeah.
And I counterweight. I used to use it all the time with the Adele system, and I think it's for some folks. I do. I think it's good for some folks, but I don't think it's good for everybody.
Yeah. David, let's talk a little bit. Some of your favorite, I don't know if I'd call them even drills, ways to help people improve. You know, maybe you call it how they synchronize their strokes, but also, and I put the word chopsticks in the notes, but which is one of the ones I like a lot. But also when you're on the putting green, ways to improve how you're practicing.
Well, obviously, if I'm doing length of stroke, I like to use a speed stick. You know, where we use the different colors for path symmetry.
Yeah.
John Dunnigan made alignment sticks into speed sticks, which I thought was pretty clever. But, you know, I go get a dowel and some different color electric tapes, and I put them 3 inches apart. So we go red to red, orange to orange, yellow to yellow, you know, green to green, and blue to blue. You know, so they start to understand the length of the stroke and the symmetry of that stroke. And I think that's a great general rule of thumb for beginner golfers. And just your average high handicap is just get a handle on learning to manage the length of the stroke and its symmetry. So speed stick would be good. Another one is some type of timing device, whether it's a metronome or just some type of device that helps them with blast or capto or something that gives them a sense of time. I'm not a big drill guy.
Yeah.
Because I like to get players to understand their movement pattern. But, you know, every once in a while I use a training aid just for concepts, you know, getting them to understand the basic idea of what we're trying to do. The chopsticks drill, which you take the 2 alignment sticks and you tie a hairband or rubber band down there at about 6 inches from the base, and you split them apart, put them under your armpits and underneath the sticks on the underside, hand to hand, and get the speed generating from both arms and both shoulders, more of a coordination or synchronization drill. I like that, chopsticks for that. So
yeah.
I got other training aids like the pendulum putting rod, and I've got the TPM, true pendulum motion. I've got different training aids.
Yeah.
And I think a teaching aid or training aids is more teaching aids. I use them more as a teaching aid rather than something to train on and work out with.
Or concept aids, right?
Exactly. Understanding aids is Rolf Kinkel. My
understanding. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I like that word.
Yeah, that's what he calls. But not to sit there and train on it. I mean, training to me means work out. Go work on the movement pattern. Let's go work out. So I think a lot of these people are calling training aids when most of what I see at the PGA show are teaching aids.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is I have a history and a reputation for taking a training aid and reconfiguring it so it actually works. So like a lot of people ask me, what's that little orange device you put on the right forearm? to keep people from being wristy. I said, it's a power package device from the Full Swing, and it's a left-handed version, and I cut off one of the cups for the forearm. And they're like, how did you think of that? I said, well, I needed something to keep the trail wrist in an extended attitude back toward the forearm. And by doing that, I modified a Full Swing training aid to turn it into a putting aid.
Yeah. And understand,
I have a history of taking, Sam Froggatt, who, he's the owner of Eyeline, golf aids, and I'm always picking on him and saying, hey, I want this training aid or that training aid, and I said, I'm going to do this to this, and he goes, well, why would you do that? I said, because that's how it would work. So it's interesting. I'll buy a training aid or get one from him if I'm at a tour event or whatever, and then I'll just completely modify it. It's kind of like that one that laser putt training aid.
Yeah.
Everybody's got trying to go straight back, straight through on it, and I take it and turn it perpendicular to the face to show people face rotation. That was another one of those things that I took that training aid and said, well, it would be best designed if it was used this way. So,
but the bottom line is, let's get them to be more about the concepts that we want to use in terms of creating speed.
Absolutely. And then if you look at Phil Kenyon, Phil Kenyon and his team, Lee Sullivan, Michael Kansky, they've done such a really good job with Vizio putting products.
Yeah.
That's because Phil's smart, and he understands, putting strokes and putting, and he knows how to take a training aid that he sees and make it better. It's kind of like, who invented the television? Do you remember? Was it General Electric or Panasonic? Who do you know? RCA.
I don't remember. Although RCA sounds like it was.
Yeah, so you take whoever invented the television, now you look at Samsung, Sony, and LG, and they make a better TV now, right?
Yeah.
So Vizio products are really, really good products. And they're well thought out. So I also like this Well Putt stuff by Boris Pansart. I really like some of the training aids he's come up with and the graphics that he puts on his mats. If people are out there looking for putting mats, Well Putt is a great, well thought out, because Boris was a good player from France. It's typically you'll see guys that make good training aids probably were good players at one time. And then I get bombarded with emails with people wanting me to try this training aid and that training aid. And you can tell either by email or if you talk to them on the phone that they were a high handicapper. And I'm like, yeah, but this thing's not designed very well, so. But yeah, I think as far as, speed, you're looking at length of stroke, anything with timing. I know there's something coming out within the next year that's going to really make a shift. I can't tell you what it is. I'm just kind of baiting you guys. And then, there's lots of little drills you can do. You can put shafts behind or alignment sticks behind the hole certain distances. I think when people are trying to learn speed, there's different phases. Okay. I think the first phase of learning speed control is learning distance control first. Okay.
Yeah.
So learning to stop the ball different distances on a flat surface. Then we should learn to stop the ball at certain distance going uphill and downhill and cross across the hill, right?
Yeah.
That would be phase 2. And I think phase 3 is learning to hit the ball into the hole at different delivery speeds.
That's sort of the red light, green light, yellow light, right?
That traffic light, right? Or or swishes, back rim, and finger rolls. And then I think the final phase of speed control is learning to hit the ball into the hole at the same speed or the intended speed. So I think we go distance control flat, distance control up and down. Then we go ball speed varying into the hole, delivery speed differences, and then consistency. So I think you learn it in phases. Does that make any sense?
Sure. Yeah, not try to think you're going to get the whole enchilada with one way of doing it.
Well, no, and then here's another thing too that people forget. If you want to be really good at speed control, change where you practice every day.
Yeah.
Don't putt on the same speed green every day. Don't putt on the same putting green every day. It's funny. We've got 4 different practice greens at Pine Needles. When I was at Keith Hills, 4 different putting greens, and they all had different shapes. And even though they were all mowed relatively the same, right, stimp, they behaved. The effective stimp was different on each putting green. So, I think it's important to putt on bent, Bermuda, greens that are relatively flat, greens with mild slopes, greens with severe slopes. And you want to become a great speed control putter, change your environment daily so that you learn to adapt and adjust.
Yeah. Great advice. Well, we're going to do one other, although I think it's going to be a small topic, but maybe not. So do you think, how often is poor speed control, in your opinion, with the people you see, a precursor to yip?
Well, yeah. So I think, there's different types of yips, right? There's rotational yips, which is twisting or handling on a calf toe. Then you have path yips, which would be trembling. And then you have acceleration yips, which is what we're talking about, why we don't want people pushing the ball to the hole. So could you imagine a cocktail made up of a player who is under twisting, right?
Yeah.
Adding left, right? And their path is kind of going in to out, and they're under twisting. Face is closed in the backswing because they're trying to keep it square to the target. And then they take it back short and accelerate and follow through. So when you get a player that combines all of those little things together, you can get a pretty yippy looking stroke.
Yeah.
And it comes from poor fundamentals. So I think it's the players that have the I call it the negative twisting or the under twisting, shut to open, taking it back short, accelerating, follow through, and they're twisting the putter and they're adding some loft. Those are the ones that start to look pretty shaky. I don't think you see a guy who rotates the putter like Tiger Woods. Now, what's funny is we use this word yip way too loosely. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Way,
okay.
Yeah, you take a guy that works the putter open to closed and swings it in plane nicely, they're probably not going to get too yippy. Now, I had a player last week, good player, club champion, good amateur in the state, came to me and swore she had the yips. She felt it. Oh, my gosh. She was just frantic. She goes, do I do claw, left hand low? Do I go lead arm lock? What do I do? Oh, my gosh. What am I going to do? I get her calmed down. Right? That's the first thing I do is I stop all the racing thoughts. And I get her calmed down and the stroke looks pretty good. And I go to put her on the Sam Putt Lab and all of her acceleration and all of her rotational graphs are smooth as silk. And then we go then we go claw and we do the same thing. And they look almost identical, smooth as silk. And I said, where are your yips? She goes, well, I don't know. Well, it's not the same here as it is on the golf course. I said, so you're telling me that you have a problem with performance anxiety? That when you're in the calm environment of a putting lesson or putting green, you don't have the yips, but yet when you get on the golf course, you have the yips? You have the yips because of performance anxiety. So it was pretty interesting. She did not have them.
Amazing, huh? Did you get feedback from her now that she's gotten back on the course too?
Yeah, she's playing fine. Because what I got her doing is learning to manage that performance anxiety, learn to calm down, quiet down, do your job.
Yeah.
And that was her thing. So to borrow from Bill Belichick, do your job. It's one of my favorite sayings. Is all right, do your job. What's your job? Well, it's to read the green. Okay, good. What's your next job? Well, pre-shot routine. All right. Go make a couple practice strokes. What's your next job? Well, set up and look at the target. Good. All right. See it in your mind's eye before you take it back, right? Yep. Okay, hit the putt. What's your next job? Feedback. Too hard, too soft, pushed it, pulled it, misread it, right? That's your job. Just do your job and nothing else. Quit worrying about the outcome.
Yes, right.
And guess what?
Bang.
Yeah. And then I just got a phone call late last night from one of my players using that new app that my buddy Cedric Dennis started, was called Spider Putt, which allows us to track the putts where they finish, short, long, right or left, based on read or technique. And then also it allows us to do strokes gained total, strokes gained left to right, strokes gained right to left while I practice. And what's funny is during his lesson, he lost 2 strokes gained total. But yet when he got home and did the process, he did his job, he was positive 4.4 out of 30 putts on the professional combine. So what's interesting is people, I don't think they understand, you have to learn to manage your thinking and your feelings. You have to learn to manage that. Because yips, a real yip is an involuntary muscle movement, okay?
Yeah.
If I have somebody that has the real yips, they have yips no matter what grip, no matter what stroke, and then I have to either change them to left-handed or we have to do something drastic, going from conventional to claw. We have to change the orientation of the hands and the limbs to quiet down the yips. So I think people just use yips as an excuse to something they don't understand. I hear it all the time on television. I hear it all the time on Morning Drive from all these experts on Morning Drive. I hear it from all these experts in the booth. These commentators always got the yips, or that looks a little yippy to me. They use the word yips when they can't explain what the solution is to the problem.
That's exciting news to me, right? It just means that if we get better at teaching this and factoring in all the pieces, which the mental part and doing your job is part of it, that there's a lot of things that can get improved, right?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going through some personal learning about myself mentally, and I think we underestimate the mental portion of putting by a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's a belief out there that if I get a perfect stroke and I've worked on all my putting skills and I've got the right putter and I'm putting with my shoulders and I'm doing all the right things, right, that the mental game will come to them. It's a huge lie. It works the other way around, Tony.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been down that path with full swing. If I get the right clubs and the right swing and learn to hit it properly, then I'll become mentally tough. And I think it's the other way around.
Well, you know what? I think that is the final ending thing for today, David, unless you have another piece that you want to put in here that you hadn't yet. I mean, that is a great way to end. Don't forget the mental part.
Yeah. Got it. We're good. Thank you so much, Tony, for having me on your show. Hopefully that helps our listeners.
It was a fabulous interview today, David. I appreciate it. I mean, I never know what to expect. I always expect a lot, and I think it was more than I thought we were going to get today. So a lot of people are going to listen to this more than once. I'll put links to Flat Stick and to the Flat Stick instructors in the show notes. And
perfect.
Appreciate you taking the time today.
Game Improvement Golf. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
David, thanks for that fabulous discussion on putting speed control and things that can help golfers and putting coaches improve in this important skill area of putting. I put links in the show notes for how to reach David at the Flat Stick Academy at Pine Needles in North Carolina, and also for the Flat Stick Academy itself, the terrific online web resource for putting improvement. I also put a link to where listeners can find a Flat Stick certified putting coach in your area. Hint, I'm one of those. Finally, David mentioned a great new putting app that you might want to consider purchasing to use in your putting practice, Spider Putt. I put a link in the show notes to where you can find that app. It's available for iPhones and Android devices. So my shout out today is to my good friend and true custom club fitter, Bob Williams, the Pasadena Club Fitter in Pasadena, California. Bob has the skills and an absolute passion to help golfers in his area to shoot lower scores through true custom club fitting. I put a link to his website in the show notes. Well, that's it for today. We'll have a great time in 2 weeks learning from Gavin Parker, PGA professional and director of the Salisbury Golf Academy at the Salisbury Country Club in Midlothian, Virginia. Gavin will share his amazing passion for teaching young golfers to enjoy the game and play their best, and how to translate to that passion to golfers of all ages. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com